Believe it or not, as I'm recording this in early January, we are only 2 months shy of when COVID started shutting everything down. And a really common question people have and have had for a long time is, when can I race again? And first of all, that varies a lot depending upon where you are in the country. I'm in North Florida, Northeast Florida specifically, and we've had racing back to some extent since probably, September or so. Predominantly 5Ks. There's been a couple of halves. There's even been one marathon, although it was pretty sparsely attended. It's mostly 5 and 10Ks. And the races are different, but they're at least real races. Conversely, we have areas of the country where states have said races are banned. They can't hold them at all. So it's really all across the board. But in general, nobody is normal yet when it comes to racing. And when COVID first started, it was in the spring last year in March, we all said, well, by the time we get to, June or so, races will probably be back as normal. But they weren't. We thought it would be summer, and it wasn't. We thought it would be fall, and it wasn't. And we keep thinking it's coming, and it just hasn't come. But now, of course, people looking at, is it this year? There's a vaccine out there now. Is this the year? Will it be spring, summer, fall? First of all, I don't know. Every guess I've had about anything has been wrong so far anyway. But I think it's realistic to be optimistic and assume that whether it's spring, summer, fall, that races are going to be back. They might be a little bit different at first. It might take a while to get back to normal, but they're probably finally coming. So then the question is, what now? So you should be identifying a race that you think has a reasonable chance of happening that you'd like to do. Whether or not that race happens, I don't know. But after you identify that race, start counting backwards, because the time for that race to come is quicker than you might think. And if it does happen, you want to be ready. So I'm going to give you some really rough guidelines for how long it would take you to get ready for that race that assumes that you've got a good base of fitness right now. And that's a big assumption, because there's a lot of people kind of went on hiatus during this and they've done very little running. Other people have kind of trained as normal and everything in between. So the times I'll give you are assuming that you've got some decent mileage, you've got a good base of fitness, you just need to get race ready for something specifically. So I'll tell you, for a full marathon, that's 16 weeks. Again, I don't want you to hear me saying that I think 16 weeks is the ideal amount of time to train for a marathon, because I think ideally you'd have more time. But I think you can get by with 16 weeks if you got that good fitness base. A half, 12 weeks, and a 5K, 6 weeks. And same with those. I'd like to have a little bit more time, but if you got a good starting point, you can get that. If your starting point is, I've really dialed it back because I didn't have the motivation, I had to be home because my kids weren't in school, for whatever, then those times are probably a little bit longer, which is why I said you want to identify that race and count backwards. So you say, well, what am I dealing with this year? So for example, if you looked at a full marathon on May 1st, which seems like an eternity away right now, 16 weeks is January 11th. And as I'm recording this, that's yesterday, meaning you need to be started now. If you had that good base of fitness. If you didn't have that good base of fitness, you're already really behind the 8 ball on that. So start thinking about, when do you think there's a race you might want to do that's got a reasonable chance, and count backwards from this. So as I said, it's, where are you today really matters a lot. The less time you've been able to dedicate to running and training, the more time you're going to need to prepare to get ready. But let's say you're looking at the fall, for example. Then I'd say, well, how about a full marathon on September 11th? Well, 16 weeks out would be May 24th, but I'm crossing that out because, if you've got that much time, I'd prefer not to take the minimum time. I'd prefer to take some more time. I'd like to have 20 weeks of marathon training. That's April 26th. That's just not that far away. So the question becomes, so what do I do between now and April 26th, or between now and whenever I've got to train? And as I've said over and over again, so much depends upon where you're at today and what you've been doing. But here's some suggestions. One, focus on base building. Base building is a really good thing to spend time on, once a year. Arthur Lydiard, who is kind of the father of all the training that we do today for coaching, when somebody asked him, how long should a base period be? His answer was, as long as possible. So in other words, if you've got way farther out, then fine, do base building now. So if you're doing base building, you're typically going to increase your miles depending upon where you're at. It's going to be almost all easy running, although once or twice a week, I would add in some strides. So why is that? So easy running is not the world's best for your mechanics and your leg speed, but it's what you need to do during base building. The strides help keep some of that leg speed. Otherwise, when you try and run faster, you'll find out even though you have this great base, it's harder to run faster. It's still going to be hard after base building, but again, you probably increase your miles, easy running, and you add some strides in. But let's say you say, you know what, I've been doing that all along. I've kept my miles up. It's been all easy running. I need something else. Then you might want to consider a session of working just on speed. So if you're doing speed, every week, probably you're going to do some degree of speed work every week. You're still going to have a long run, probably 75 to 100 minutes for the long run. And you're going to inject some tempo work now and then, maybe every other week. It's certainly not going to be an every week thing, or maybe even once a month, but primarily focusing on the speed and getting that leg turnover and getting speed done. As I said, if you haven't done base building, I would do base building before speed work. But if you got a good base and you've got the time, spend some time working on speed. Oh, how long? 8 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks is probably the most I would spend just dedicated on that. But you could do speed. And then finally, you can say, I just want to work on general fitness. I don't really need the speed. I've got the base. Well, general fitness, you're going to have a long run. Again, it probably about 90 minutes to 120 minutes. You're going to have a balance of speed and tempo work, depending upon how many days you work out. Total mileage, you might do some speed and tempo work almost every week. You might do speed and tempo 1 week, and then the next week just do speed, then speed and tempo again, the next week tempo. But you're going to have a kind of a balance of those, whereas in the speed work, you're really heavily focused on the speed. And probably about every 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to want to put a steady run in there. What a steady run is, it's slower than tempo or lactate threshold pace. It's slower than that. It's faster than your marathon pace, but you're running it for a little bit longer of time. How long, it depends upon you and your fitness level. I had a run like that the other day. For me, it was 5 miles at a pace like that, but you could just do some general fitness. But the bottom line is, I do hope that races are going to be kind of really coming back this year. So start looking ahead, because it's going to be easy to get caught flat-footed, and you want to be ready to go when the races are ready to go.